Thursday Night Showdown show. Myself, Ben Raza, here with the man himself, Alex Baker. New backdrop for you. How are you, man? Where are you? How are you?
I'm good, man. I was having a little slow morning today. I haven't made it over to the Osmo office yet, so I'm just doing it from home
Nothing wrong with
office.
that. Okay.
How are you doing, man?
Good. We got a really good game here. Two annoying teams, I think most people would say, but it's a competitive one. They desperately need it with the Bears and the Cowboys. And we'll get right to it. I do want to say our sponsors at Fantasy Draft sticking with us, which we really do appreciate. 100% of those entry fees paid out to winners, 100%, which means just more money in your pocket. We see it add up time and time again. I don't need to go through the whole thing, but I will say we've seen some big winners from the Osmo site over there, and up to 30% of the bankroll can be drained to rake. That was something that caught my eye when I was reading it, and it really does just add up. So we encourage everyone to get over there. Use the promo code Osmo, 7-day free trial. And one other housekeeping thing, and then we'll dive right in. We're doing another Twitter giveaway, and we've done this a couple times with the Thursday night game. So you can win a free NFL Osmo Plus yearly pass, $250 value. All you have to do is, go to Twitter, retweet, and respond with guess the player that scores the most fantasy points in the game tonight. One random winner will be drawn from the correct answers. So that's a straight free roll. Go and do that and make the game that much more interesting. But, we were talking before the show, and you mentioned to me about the Cowboys, how it seems like in theory they should just roll in this game. But the spread is pretty close. They are a slight favorite on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a couple things that are surprising. I mean, Dak Prescott, he's averaging 8.5 yards per attempt this season, which is exceptional. I mean, that's almost up there with the top guys in the league. And 4.6 yards per run. So that's above average for both of the Dallas offensive phases. And then they're also above average in both defensive metrics, yards per attempt and passing and rushing. So a really good team statistically, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to fire Jason Garrett before they do it, but it seems like something's missing because this team has everything that you could want, from a personnel standpoint, and yet here they are basically haven't beaten anyone of value. They've lost to the Jets. They were embarrassed on Thanksgiving, and they are very lucky that the Eagles are equally, just a mess right now. So you've got that. Then on the Bears side, Trubisky did look good on Thanksgiving, and, they've got some weapons around him. Injury-wise, I guess the biggest news would be that Taylor Gabriel did not pass concussion protocol. He is out tonight. Other than that, they're still a little banged up at tight end. I see Tony Pollard questionable. Is there anything else really that you're monitoring? Is this pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I mean, not too many injuries. Tony Pollard doesn't really move the needle a ton for me.
No.
Yeah, so I think what they did last week with the same injuries was pretty interesting in Chicago, so we can kind of break that down. But I don't think there would be any surprises tonight.
No, I will say, just to add, completely, it looks like Van Der Esch, who's one of the better defensive players in the Cowboys, is not going to play. They also lost a guard during the week, so a little banged up just here and there. And then Prince Amukamara on the Bears side, I believe, is doubtful. So those are injuries, certainly not guys that you can play, but it's good to know some of the personnel is missing, which is to be expected. It's week 14. Guys are hurt, and that's no surprise to anyone, but we can really dive into it. Like I said, Cowboys 3-point favorite, over under 43.5. Nothing that really stands out. So I guess we'll start with the Cowboys themselves. You mentioned, Dak's been good this year. It's really been impressive. I thought he's kind of carried the load. Zeke is still the most expensive guy, on DraftKings in terms of captain. He's almost 17,000. What do you make? I guess we can start with Zeke himself. Are you going to start plugging him in on FanDuel and DraftKings and work around him, or do you think he's more of a flex play?
Yeah, I mean, I like him a lot more at captain because he's the highest projected player in the game, so most likely to be the highest scoring. And I think that because he's a running back, a lot of those points aren't shared with the teammates. I mean, I feel like a broken record at this point. We talk about this every week, but
It's important, though.
getting the rushing touchdowns and yardage, there's not as much a chance that another player on the team kind of takes that top scoring performance away from you. So I like Zeke a lot.
Yeah, and the thing I'll say about Zeke, I mean, we know it hasn't been an explosive year by any stretch, but he gets a ton of work. Pollard questionable, that should solidify it even more. Not that he's not, but what we saw last week in a game, they were, I don't want to say blown out by the Bills, but they were trailing most of it. It wasn't like he was even remotely phased out. That equated to 10 targets on his end. Then you look at other games where they're in it 20 carries. So it's like, the volume is going to be there. It's just a matter of, do you think it's going to come in the form of targets, which is maybe, it's good for PPR, but he's sharing it with Dak? Or do you think, man, they control this game on the ground and he's getting all those points with the rushing?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, it's probably going to be some combination of both.
Yeah.
And Dak is the guy I have projected to be the second most likely to be the top scorer. So it is kind of some competition on the Dallas side, but I really like Zeke a lot.
Yeah, and you just mentioned Dak having a good year, 23 touchdowns through the air, and he's shown, he's a mobile guy. He is somewhat of a red zone threat. So I get the appeal of using him as captain as well, and you hope maybe he can run one in. That's gigantic when you're rostering a quarterback at captain, because you don't want the receivers to go too nuclear, because then one of them will most likely be the captain. But what do you make, do you kind of leverage Dak against Zeke in the sense that maybe it's all done through the passing game? Or do you feel, I mean, you certainly compare him, it's just a lot of salary.
Yeah, I think that you could have one in the flex, and that's totally viable. There's some correlation there. That's nice. And these are probably two of the most likely guys to be the top scorers. So, like, I have on my Showdown top plays tool, I have the chance that someone will be one of the top 6. And Dak is about 75% chance to be number 2 through 6. So he would be number 1 on my list of guys I want to put in a flex.
Yeah, and that's something that I've tried to work on throughout the year, is distinguishing, okay, what are the chances this guy is the top scorer versus one of the top 6? Because those are two different questions. Some guys are boom or bust, where they have actually a higher chance to be a captain, but if they miss, there's a lesser chance that they're in the flex. And those are more all-in or fade types, whether it's captain or omitting them completely. Then you have guys with a higher floor like Dak, where it's kind of hard to imagine, more often than not, he's going to be maybe in the 6. It's just maybe not in a captain role. But in terms of his pass catchers, we've got Amari, we've got Gallup, we've got Cobb. We'll save the real shady people for a little later. What do you make of someone like Amari? 11 targets against the Bills. He was going against Tre'Davious White. Do you like him as a captain, as that receiver, which we like to put in that captain spot?
Yeah, I like Amari a lot. Being a receiver is nice, and I also like the fact that, man, he's been disappointing like people a lot, especially.
Yeah.
He had a 0 against the Patriots, and I think people are gonna think he's dust, and maybe he is, but I'm going to continue kind of trying it out. How about you, man? What are you making of that?
I mean, I think people need to, recency bias is always a real thing. And I'll just say, every team, yes, there's good corners on a lot of these teams. He had Slay, but then just even the last 2 weeks, he had the Patriots secondary, who is one of the best, with Gilmore. He did absolutely nothing. The game was also in awful weather. Then he went on Thanksgiving. He got 11 targets against Tre'Davious White, who is one of the better corners. So I don't think the sky is falling just yet, and I think this could be a bounce-back spot. Bears are not a terrible defense by any stretch, but he's a fantastic player, and I think maybe buying, I don't want to say low, but this is a good spot, and I do feel pretty comfortable starting with Amari at captain.
I like it, man. One caveat is that he hasn't been playing as much these past couple weeks as normal. So I'm a little bit worried that he's not on the field for every play, but I mean, I think the potential, if he is, I mean, that's huge. And he played about 85% of the snaps last week, I think, so not bad, but there are some real reasons to be concerned, but I still think he's probably one of the best plays.
Yeah, I mean, you look, he has a knee, but practice without limitations, it says, and he's good to go. There's no doubt. Of course, you want your guys on the field as much as possible. he should have plenty of work regardless. And then you've got, Michael Gallup is someone I think if you're getting very aggressive, like on FanDuel, and you want to take an awkward captain, he does have a ceiling. It's just, of course, there's a much lower floor than the elite players. He's going to see middling targets. Maybe Cooper draws, some of that top coverage. I don't know how often I'll get there. And then Randall Cobb to me is much more of a flex play than a captain. He should get a handful of targets, lower ADOT, pretty decent floor for that salary, but I don't think he has a massive game. I'd be shocked if he broke the slate.
Yeah, I think that he has had a really big game this season, so I think people may be a little bit too enthusiastic about Cobb. And Gallup has been tremendous, but if these two guys are popular and Amari is kind of the contrarian play, that
What a world!
Pretty easy.
Yeah, he's just, Amari. I think people forget how good he is, and I know Dallas. I say this every week. They need the game. That doesn't mean they're going to get it. Clearly, they needed the Bills game, and many others didn't get them. But he's going to be busy. And then just, we'll switch to the Bears in a second. But we're at the mercy of chat. They want to talk about Blake Jarwin, so that's what we're going to talk about. You've got Witten, you've got Jarwin. What do you make of the next level of Cowboys that we could possibly use tonight?
Man, well, Witten, he had an amazing game on Thanksgiving, so
yes.
I'm sure that's in the back of people's minds. So I feel like if we're going with against the public, maybe then Witten could be a fade. Jarwin, I have to say, I mean, he's not on my radar like a ton. He only played 1 out of 4 passing. He only ran routes on 1 of 4 passing plays last week. So for a guy that doesn't get targeted a ton, that's a pretty big red flag for me. I don't know. Like, do you think there's merit in Jarwin?
So, it's tough because I looked at the snap count and it's not something where I saw it and I was encouraged. It was like, God, this guy's not on there. But I will say he consistently is going to get at least a couple targets. He can be a red zone threat. And what you're really looking for is, can we get lucky with a touchdown? The problem, and you've talked about this on a lot of showdown slates with me during the year, if he was going to be super low owned, I would say, you know what, give me my 3 targets and I'll take a chance. I think he will be moderately popular. And for that, it could be a problem. So that's something I will lean on your ownership projections to kind of guide me with what I want to do with these, bottom feeder, price saver type guys.
Yeah, I think the chance of like a kicker defense being one of the top scoring plays is much higher than a second tight end like Jarwin. So that'd be kind of my general strategy there.
Yeah, and a game like this with, I don't think it's impossible we see a really ugly one here. A 13-10 is in the cards. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but these defenses could clearly overwhelm. I mean, Trubisky, not even going to go there. We will in a second. Other than that, though, I don't think you want to even if Pollard is ruled out, I don't think I'm going to need to go to Jamize Olawale. I don't know who that is.
Dude, you got to give some love to the fullback, man.
Jeez. Yeah, I mean, times are tough behind Zeke. I don't know what they'll do with Tavon Austin. There's a lot of things they can do. I don't think I'll be trying to infer too much about it.
Tavon Austin's that classic guy that people love playing him, and he's like a flashy player, and that works like really well like once every season. But
6 years. No, I know it's people do love to play him, and in college he was so electric, and he's a gadget guy, and you can pair him up with the defense because he's going to return the punt. Yeah, I mean, is it possible? Of course it's possible, but as you mentioned, and we'll talk about defense and kickers later in the show, give me 9 points from those guys. If Tavon Austin can eclipse that, more power to the people that played him. I will lean with the higher floor, lower ceiling types.
Yeah, I mean, I have Tavon Austin projected for 1 fantasy point, so
yeah,
I'm not too excited. But I will mention, last week when Cooper didn't play quite as much, it was Austin getting some more snaps. So, I mean, maybe if you're down on Cooper, you could go to Austin.
That's good to know. Now you also have to ask yourself, is that a product that they were trailing throughout and needed to play catch up? If you think that happens here, maybe you can bump someone like that. So as always, it's going to be scenario based. And then on the Bears side, So I watched, of course, they were the first game, and somehow they let Kenny Golladay be like 60 yards in the clear. I don't know what they were doing, but Trubisky did look pretty good. The offense got going, and you mentioned Gabriel was out. So we'll start with Trubisky. Of course, we're going to talk about Anthony Miller because that's who I really want to mention. But what do you make of Mitch at this quarterback position for the Bears?
I think it's important not to overreact to one piece of information. So he had a good game, but his yardage per attempt on the season's hovering right around 6. I mean, that's above the 5.6 it was before last week. But if you add that all up, you got to think that Trubisky is not a great fantasy quarterback. And it hurts to say it, but I'm not super enthusiastic aside from the fact that it's one game and you need 6 players.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of that was his first 300-yard bonus. It was inside, which I want to say this game is out at night in Chicago. And as you mentioned, it kind of just seemed almost like an outlier. We know he's somewhat talented, he's somewhat mobile, but at the end of the day, I don't believe he's turned any sort of corner. I would expect a middling game, not 340 through the air. Of course, we're forced. It's one game to look at these guys. Now, he's not even the most expensive Bear. We have Allen Robinson, who sees a lot of targets, 12 last week, 10 the week before, leading the pricing for the Bears. Do you feel comfortable looking at him, or is he more of a flex play for you? What are you doing with their clear number one target?
Yeah, I think he's probably my favorite Bear. He seems to be immune to Trubisky's struggles because he's caught 2/3 of his passes this year. About this camera's in my way here. 12 yards per catch, so pretty solid. That's about 8 yards per target, and that's a lot higher than that 6 that Trubisky has been averaging. So he's been having a good year so far, and you gotta like his chances tonight.
He really hasn't. I mean, he's come on lately. He had some real bad games. Now, Trubisky was hurt. It was really bad and really dire for a while. We know that the Bears passing attack is going to have some risk no matter who is under center. But I do think that Robinson, I don't know, kind of traditionally is a little overlooked. He won't be here just because it's one game. But man, it is hard to imagine people not gravitating hard to Anthony Miller. He was fantastic on Thanksgiving. He was super popular at a dirt cheap price and performed for everyone with his 13 targets. I know he's a fine play tonight, but do you worry that he is just going to be so massively owned given what we saw on Thanksgiving?
Well, one thing that stands out to me is the 7.4 fantasy points per game. So I think that's going to be a really big red flag to people who are just trying to make lineups on an app or something like that. Of course, he had a huge game last week, and he's been good for a couple weeks before that. It's hard for me to say because these factors seem to be conflicting to some extent. So I don't know. Like, how often do you think people look at this fantasy points per game thing on the sites?
So I always wonder that because I agree. It's similar. You know me, I'm a golf guy. I think people look, when they see the made cut thing, and it's like, oh, this guy's 1 for 5 in made cuts, but it doesn't tell the whole story. I think there's something to that with Anthony Miller, but I also think people click in the game log and they see the last 3 and they're just like, oh, this is the guy. Now, when you dig even deeper, you see he hasn't even scored on the year. So we know that the ceiling is there. I just, as you mentioned, there's conflating kind of things that kind of pull me in both directions.
Yeah, I think he is a good play, like just from a raw, not considering ownership at least, because with Taylor Gabriel out, he's kind of cemented himself as the second wide receiver. Their other guy, Javon Wims, doesn't really get targeted much, and Cordarrelle Patterson is kind of in the Tavon Austin category.
I was just going to say that. Yep. People love to play that guy, and they think, oh, let me pair him with the defense because he's going to return a kickoff for a touchdown. Maybe, but
I mean, we can build a lineup out of this. So Bears D, Dallas D, Cordarrelle, and Tavon Austin.
And we just hope back and forth kickoff returns all game, no offense on the field, and we're just golden. I like it, but yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, Wims is going to be that third guy. He did see in his defense, 6 targets, but I don't know how high that ceiling is. Miller, I would try to find the money to him, even though I think ownership wise, is going to gravitate. But we do have to talk because it's the Bears. They do things a little differently. Tariq Cohen is kind of a receiver almost at this point. We know what they're going to do with him, and he is right below Miller. I like him as a pivot, especially if there's a discrepancy in ownership coming off a pretty bad game on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think Tariq Cohen, he's a good play, especially if you're like building a game script where Chicago is trailing, because I think that he's going to be getting the nod over David Montgomery in that kind of situation. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he's someone, and we'll talk about some captain, but I think as a very aggressive captain, that is the type of guy that I don't mind going to. Definitely hope that the Bears are trailing. You can use him with guys like Zeke, I think correlate very well. Even Dallas defense, and hope that they're just forced to pass, because that's what you said it. Now, on the other side of that coin, what do you make of David Montgomery? We know that you want Chicago to be winning. He's going to get his touches on the ground, but not a ton of receiving upside.
Yeah, I think he's fine. I mean, I do like kind of those running backs and the captain. So like, let me pull up my thing again. So David Montgomery, actually, when I ran my thing, I guess only 3% chance of being the top scoring player. So kind of contrary to what I might have expected, just based on my intuition. So it's always nice to have kind of tools in the gadget box like that.
And that's a perfect, I will give a quick plug of that is a perfect example of why you should sign up and get these tools, because yes, intuition is great. And I mean, I do incorporate feel into my process, but you want to also take a look, because sometimes you think something, then you look at the data and you're like, let me recheck and dig into why this is. Because you may not think it, and it's not to say it just is automatic, but it at least makes you double check everything. And that is super important. That is why we certainly recommend get behind the paywall. I know we had a ton of signups on Cyber Monday. We're excited for all the new people, and it's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, so a lot of the people watching might have signed up on that code, and they have access to all this stuff. So make sure to, under the NFL menu, go to this Showdown top plays, and you can see exactly what we're talking about.
No doubt about it. All right, so we got these talk about made up people. The Bears tight ends is actually a collection of guys I've never heard of. One of them caught a touchdown on Thanksgiving. This Jesper Horsted fella. I would rather play the Cowboys tight ends if I was forced. Are you going to go to guys like this, or are you going to stick to the kind of guys we've already talked about for the Bears?
So this was what I was alluding to with what they did was pretty interesting, because the tight ends like barely ran any routes last week. And I mean, it might have been just because they don't know the playbook. They haven't really played like with the Bears this year to this point. JB Holtz did run more routes than Jesper Horsted, so he'd be the guy. If I wanted to really try to be sneaky, I'd look at Holtz. But the surprising thing is that Javon Wims and Cordarrelle Patterson, as well as Matt Miller and Robinson, of course, were all on the field a decent amount of time. So they went 4 wide, and they did that because they didn't feel confident in these tight ends. So if anyone, I would maybe go to Wims or Cordarrelle over the tight ends.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go. I will say, though, I think you brought up something, and it doesn't always work like this, but that Jesper Horsted guy, he caught a touchdown last week. And I think people are just going to look and say, oh, well, that's the preferred guy. If I had to pick one, it would definitely be Holtz. He had more opportunities. It didn't materialize, but you'll take that every day if you're forced. I'm with you. And, we talk all the time, and it's common knowledge now. You're building to a narrative. One of those narratives can be personnel packages, though. So if you say, okay, I think the Bears are going to run 4 wide, build accordingly. On the flip side, if you think they're going to roll 2 tight ends out there and pound the ball, David Montgomery, the tight ends, maybe a slower pace game. Those are options that you have when trying to correlate.
Yeah, exactly. So what they did last week is a 4 wide, but we don't know exactly what the game plan is this week. So that's kind of what the intrigue of this is. You're making these assumptions about who's going to be on the field. And if you can read into it better than anyone, you get an edge.
Definitely. Yeah, if you pick a scenario and it comes to fruition, that makes all the difference. Now, here we go. Like I said, people have been waiting. We've got the Bears defense. We've got the Cowboys defense. We got Eddie Pinheiro, Brett Maher. What do you say? What do you do here? Think all of them are somewhat viable. Not that they aren't normally, but do you have a preference? Do you like these type of plays today?
I think that I prefer the kickers a decent amount to the defense. Defense is kind of nice because like in certain games where it's low scoring, you have a good shot at hitting, so there's some correlation with other plays you can make. But kicker, generally a higher scoring position, and to boot, they're cheaper tonight. So I'm thinking maybe Eddie De Niro or Brett Maher. Uh, Neither quarterback turns it over much. Trubisky's numbers are especially surprising. Only 2% interception rate, which is lower than average. So if you're thinking that Trubisky is dust and he's going to give up a pick six, like think again.
Yeah, he's actually crossed. He's so bad that he doesn't even have the opportunity to throw picks. He just throws it away and does other mind-boggling things. So keep it, and I've looked, I don't see much, but leading up to lock, we will be, we have plenty of members in Slack. We'll be talking about this game is in Chicago outside. So keep an eye on the wind. If something flares up, of course, the kickers are going to be affected. As you always mention, I think it's a great tip. Check the Vegas props. Those will tell you if there is an issue or if one of the kickers stands out. But as I see right now, both are fine. The Cowboys kicker is very reliable. He was awful on Thanksgiving, definitely on a short leash in life. So he better make him if he gets the chance. It's tough because I think this game could be very low scoring. But as you mentioned, neither defense is really a high upside play given these quarterbacks. That makes it difficult.
Yeah. It's tricky because of these four, both kickers and both defenses. You want some of these guys because they're so much more reliable than like the Jarwins and Austins, and you need some salary savers. So I'll definitely be leaning to these guys, even though that from an objective standpoint, it's like I'm not very excited about them.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you're jamming in Zeke or Dak and a couple of those other guys, you're going to need someone down here. Just looking at the salaries, would you say that it's going to be someone like Javon Wims for you? Is it going to be the defense and kickers that we've talked about? I mean, how do you plan to kind of fill out the back end of rosters if you spend up?
I think the kickers. So Eddie Pinheiro, he is projected to have about a little bit more than 1.5 field goals if you buy into the Vegas line, and Maher is right around 1.5. So based on that, I mean, if it goes over, you're gonna have around 8 points usually, and that's probably gonna be good enough if you need those high salary guys.
Yeah, I think Wims is going to be where a lot of people go. Again, just most times almost every time basically when we're doing a Thursday game, the teams are not coming off a Thursday game, and that's the case here. It wasn't a standalone, but it was only 3 games. Everybody was watching because it was Thanksgiving, and I think the recency bump will be even more immense for guys like Wims, even Trubisky to some extent, obviously Anthony Miller. So I'm not saying I'm just fading those guys, but I will look to differentiate towards the bottom where I can. It's just tough because there isn't a ton. You either go to the Cowboys tight ends, the kickers or defenses. There's not much else to choose from. But let's talk captain. I know that's what a lot of people want to do before we duck on out of here, and we'll give some other takes. But you mentioned the big guys, Zeke's and Dax. Is there someone in that mid range? For me, it's Tariq Cohen. I'll come out and say it. That you think maybe could be an interesting captain tonight.
Honestly, like I think Anthony Miller, but I think he's going to be popular. But so I'll go with the higher price guy. I think that Mari Cooper may go
Okay.
underowned. I think that just he played so badly a couple weeks ago, and then last week a little bit underwhelming. So people going off the game log. I guess he had 85 yards last week, decent but not great.
No, and I still think people, it's all about expectations. It wasn't like he was awful. He had 8 catches, but he did not reward. Whereas like if you had Anthony Miller at 3,600, that was not the problem. Clearly, that was fantastic. So I do think coming off the Patriots and then the Cowboys were just bad. Cooper is interesting. But it's tough because with Zeke, and some guys like that, I think the game script is a lot easier to build around when you use him at captain. With Amare, he's kind of ambiguous to me of what kind of game that is. You want Dallas trailing, I guess, but at the same time, they could be winning because of him.
Yeah, I mean the game script really comes into play in the fourth quarter. A lot of times you see guys get there in 3 quarters, and that's what I'd be hoping for with Cooper. Really, is that the first 3 quarters Dallas puts up a lot of points, and then nothing happens in the fourth quarter. So that would be a scenario where I think Cooper would be the highest scorer.
Absolutely. It's not like these guys can't get it done. And I agree. You worry more about, like, to me, Montgomery comes to mind, where it's like if he doesn't do damage early and they fall behind, you're going to have a really tough time clawing back because he just may not get opportunities. Now, it's hard to imagine, yes, I guess there's a scenario where Dallas smokes them early, doesn't need to throw, but you have to think that Cooper would be involved. That's a pretty narrow window for them to rack up a ton of points, and he's not part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is that if if the Bears don't do anything, then Montgomery won't get any points. Like Cooper, it's like the they would have to do something without him, and that's a little bit harder to visualize.
Yeah, I feel like you just get multiple chances with a guy like that. He could do his damage early, the game flow could go right, and he could do damage late. Some of these other guys, not the case. So for me, I'll just give a couple of narratives and pass it right to you, and then we can see what's what. I think this game, my number one kind of build, I think it's going to be somewhat choppy, somewhat low scoring. So for me, that bumps kickers, it bumps defenses. I don't mind, some of these guys who have a lower ADOT, get some targets, and then take a shot with like a Cohen, a Cooper, as that, maybe slate breaking type guy.
Yeah, I kind of like it. My general take on this game is that I think Chicago, their defense is overrated a lot. They haven't been nearly as good this year as previous years, and because of that, I think Dallas. I think I'm going to be over the field on those guys and kind of play that Dallas is going to win this one.
Man, it's not personal, it's business with you. No Bears love for your boys.
Yeah, I mean, once the game comes on, I'll be rooting for the Bears, but I can't really. It's hard to build an algorithm to really factor in your homer biases.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Not as effective. But I will say just real quick, and then we can give our final thoughts. We alluded to the tools behind the paywall. We do have one in front of the paywall today. It's your top showdown and single grade plays for DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as the NHL lineup builder. That's free premium content. We want to give you a chance to see one of the many tools that we have. So go check that out. We hope that you like it, and then we hope that you'll come on in for the rest of it. Is there anything you want to talk about what we got going on? I know we're all very busy with all these sports in full swing.
Yeah, man, it's an exciting time of year. So, I mean, stick to NFL because I'm sure a lot of people may not play NBA or NHL. But we have daily shows every morning, and a lot of great articles on the site. And then once you get closer to Sunday, I mean, you got all the tools at your disposal, like the projections, the ownership. You can get fantasy crunchers and add-on, and you can be a great fantasy player kind of on your own. But these are all weapons that you can use to take your game to the next level.
Absolutely. And like I said, just from personal experience, I watch a ton of football. I love sports. I know these players, but you use that information to kind of smooth out the edges, to see things you may have missed. And sometimes it confirms what you already thought. And sometimes it makes you say, all right, maybe I'm a little off base thinking that the Cowboys are actually good. Let me dig into why this team is 6-6. And with Showdown, especially, it's hard to conceptually build with one game. So you need things like that. So for me tonight, I'm going to take some shots, particularly with the Bears players. Like I said, Tariq Cohen probably is going to define my night, and so be it. But I'd rather have a guy with a boom. My final thoughts are going to be, if I'm going to take a stand, it's going to be with a boom bust type guy rather than someone like Randall Cobb, Montgomery, who I think will have fine games. But I don't think if you get that right, it's a slate breaking type performance.
Man, I don't know if I see any of these slate breakers tonight. So
Maybe not. Yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe like the defense and kicker goes off because I'm sure I'll have a lot of those guys.
Fair enough. On that note, everyone, Chad, I appreciate 12:30 EST. No problem. You guys stick with us. We're gonna have a fun end to the season. But if you can hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, because as Alex said, we got shows on shows. I will be on multiple. I will be in the NBA show tomorrow, then the NFL show, and then the betting show, back to back style. So you'll see a lot of me tomorrow. We got plenty of stuff coming on later with the NBA, Lonnie Walker season in the gang, but it'll be a good time. So everyone, we're going to bounce on out of here. If you have any questions, get in Slack. Alex always in there. I'm in there. All our contributors answering questions leading up to lock. Good luck tonight on the showdown, and we'll be back for week 15 Thursday